Hello, and welcome to iHeart Cooking. I'm registered dietitian Jennifer Stockler.
And I'm Chef Dugan Wetzel.
We are the hosts of iHeart Cooking, a program that's brought to you by WCTV, RPNL, and Reed Health Community Benefits. Today on iHeart Cooking, we're going to be talking about why more fiber. So today on iHeart Cooking, we're learning about why you want to add more fiber to your meals or your diet. Today we're going to be doing a recipe. It's called kale and white bean pot pie with chive biscuit. It's a pretty extensive recipe. It does take some time, active-wise. It does take some time to bake. Because it does take that time, we're going to dive right into the recipe, and as we go along, we'll talk about why we're going to be adding that fiber.
Yeah, the first thing we're doing is we're going to get our oil hot. We're going to cook all of our ingredients for our pot pie. We're actually going to start with a mirepoix. Onions, carrots, celery. Mirepoix is a 2:1 ratio, which is 2 parts onion, 1 part carrot, 1 part celery. It's been going, people have been using that for ever, and it's just a really popular, it's classic French cooking. That's just, don't change it if it doesn't break. Yeah.
You hear us talk about all the time, especially probably myself, we love the smell of it because it makes your kitchen smell so good, just getting that basic onion and carrots and celery and everything kind of cooking there. So great basics to a lot of recipes because it's going to add those flavors. Many of you know from past recipes we don't add a lot of salt to it. If we can, we're going to omit that out for our heart health, you know, hypertension, heart failure. So that's something that this is going to be adding that flavor to these dishes.
We've got our oil going. I'm just going to test it with a little bit of vegetable stock here. It's starting to sizzle, which means we're good to start adding all of our products. So, like I said, onions, carrots, and celery. Gonna cook that down maybe 2 minutes, kind of let the onions start to be a little transparent, soften the carrots up a little bit, and the celery. We're using a matchstick carrot just because you want the cooking times to be very similar with all 3 ingredients because you're putting them in at the same time. Celery's kind of really fibrous, it's really hard to chew. Carrots can be the same way, and onions are the exact opposite. So we're doing smaller pieces of a couple of them just to kind of shrink down that cook time a little bit. So you can use chopped carrots, you can use whole carrots, baby carrots if you like that.
Yep.
But for the sake of this recipe, we're slicing them thin. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you want more of that crunchiness later in the recipe to see the vegetable, yeah, keep them a little bit bigger. But then we have some individuals who don't like onions, who don't like really carrots or celery, and if you cut them smaller, once you add all the other ingredients, you're not really going to be able to find those in that recipe, and it's going to kind of incorporate all together. So you can still add that flavor for individuals who don't maybe like some of these ingredients without them knowing what's really there.
So we're just going to let that go a little bit. The next couple ingredients that we're going to add is garlic and our herbs. Kind of let the herbs, you know, liven it up, freshen it up, just to give it a little bit more flavor.
Absolutely. So while this is kind of cooking, we can kind of talk more about why fiber. That's something that, as an adult, is recommended that you get about 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day. There are 2 different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. So our bodies can absorb a little bit, but some of the fiber we don't absorb. Basically, we eat it, it's excreted right back out. The one nice thing about that is on the way back out, it collects waste like cholesterol, which is going to help lower cholesterol, your LDLs, helping with heart health. It also helps you keep regulated as well. So it kind of does a lot of different things, so we want more of that. Another good thing about it can help with weight management because fiber makes you feel fuller for longer, so you're less likely to eat as much after a meal later on. So it can help with weight management, lessening the amount of calories that you're consuming. So it's always a good idea to try to get as much fiber as you can per day. Little suggestion, if you're not getting a lot of fiber, don't go from 5 grams a day up to 25 or 30, you're probably going to have some abdominal pain, some GI discomforts, and things happen. So kind of do it in a nice gradual increase for that.
So we've got our garlic in there. We're going to add our herbs. We're using thyme and we're using rosemary. Always good to use fresh products, but if you're not able to get fresh thyme or rosemary, we're going to use dry ingredients for the sake of this recipe. So what I want to show you is a little trick. Dried rosemary is extremely hard, and it gets caught in your teeth really easily. So something you can do is just kind of put it in your hand and just crush it. I take the other hand and just rub it together and then let it kind of just fall out as it gets smaller. That way, you know, you're not dealing with the large, almost like pieces of stem.
Yeah, it's like pine kind of, pine needles that you kind of think of when you think rosemary. And also by doing this, like I can even smell it, it's kind of excreting some of those oils out of that dried ingredient that will enhance the flavor of the product.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just going to stir that. Add a little bit more here.
That's one thing, a lot of people don't like the rosemary because it reminds them of pine needles or the smell of it. It is probably my favorite herb that is out there. You can start smelling that aroma of the rosemary, the thyme, the garlic, the onions, all of that, and it's just, it already smells good.
Absolutely. Next step that we're doing here, we're going to add our flour. This is going to help kind of bind it together when we add our liquid, which is going to be a vegetable broth. You want to add this first before your liquid because, point being, it kind of incorporates, it absorbs on the vegetables, whereas if you put the liquid in first, get it hot, and then you put your flour in, it's going to clump up. And then it's impossible to get rid of those clumps, and then you're just going to eat pieces of flour, and that's not what we're going for here. So kind of just let that cook down for 30 seconds. It really doesn't have to be that long. So that's there. We're going to add our kale, and if you look here, it's very kind of almost like a dull green. It has some purple in it, but once you cook it and it heats up, it gets very vibrant.
Yes,
it gets very bright, and it actually looks very appealing once it's cooked. So I'll show you here in a second.
I mean, and that's one of that. Kale it's become very popular. You're seeing a lot more recipes. You're seeing it out on the shelves more. It's very good in fiber, so that's one reason we kind of are using this recipe, because it is high in fiber. It has a great source of vitamins and minerals in there. So definitely a great product to use, and you can use it in salads, saute it, cook with it. I mean, you can use it in a lot of different things.
It's not, and because it is so fibrous, it has a lot of fiber. It's kind of, when it's raw, it's a harder lettuce. It's a heartier lettuce. So when you're wanting to cook it down, especially in a pot pie or something like that, you want it to go just a little bit longer than normal, because it does take just a little bit longer to soften up.
It's not like the spinach. If you would want to replace it, you could easily replace this with spinach too. But yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer there. It's not going to wilt like some of the others.
Yeah, it's just takes a little bit more time. Not extremely long, but you don't want it to be hard. Yeah.
And as it's cooking, I can even see it. It's kind of getting this more, like Dugan said, a more vibrant color to it. It's getting more of a glassy glaze kind of to that. So it's making it actually look a lot colorful than what it did when it originally went in there.
Okay, so we've got our kale cooked down. It's nice and soft. It's starting to wilt. So we're going to add our vegetable broth. Going to turn it up to high, let it kind of start boiling, help it thicken up a little bit, and then we'll reduce it down to a simmer and just let it kind of get a nice heartier texture to it, a nice base. Almost like a sauce consistency.
And while that's kind of cooking, we're going to talk about the flour that we actually added into it. The recipe calls for a white whole wheat flour. Why we're kind of actually going towards that, again, is kind of more that fiber aspect because it's a whole grain. So it's going to encompass the whole entire wheat of the grain, every single part of it, meaning it adds all the nutrition. You're not losing anything like enriched flour, meaning the fiber is going to stay there too. So it's a little bit higher. So that's what the recipe calls for, but we're kind of using a different flour today though too. Very similar though, but different.
We are actually using a semolina flour. Very close. If you look at it, it almost looks like a cornmeal. It's got a nice grainy texture to it. It's really good, especially if you like, you know, a little bit of if you're a texture person, it's awesome in biscuits. You can substitute it with cornmeal and do things like that. It's got a nice flavor to it as well. So.
And we're actually going to use that same flour in our biscuits that we're going to make here in a little bit to kind of go on top of this recipe. So you're going to have kind of that in between what I'm going to think of your biscuits and your cornbread, kind of to the texture of that.
Absolutely.
All right, well, our mixture is done. It cooked down. As you can kind of see, it kind of thickened up. So now we're going to add our, basically, there's the white beans.
Northern beans.
Northern white beans.
Yeah.
Great fiber aspect. Again, that's where we're getting all the fiber intake. Beans are known to be great for fiber. The nice thing is we're not, as you can probably see, there's no added meat source in here, but you're actually getting protein from the white beans itself. So that's something that will have the protein component of it, so you don't really have to add a meat. You could really easily add chicken or something to this, but you really don't have to. So it is considered a vegetarian meal.
Absolutely. So now that they're in there, they've kind of stirred in, they've incorporated and everything, we're actually going to transfer it over to a baking sheet. Just going to put the entire mixture in there. And we're going to kind of let that cool for a little bit. And we're going to move on to our biscuit. So get this out of the way here.
Put this over here.
Okay. So for biscuit making, rule of thumb, mix your dry ingredients, mix your wet ingredients, and then bring them together. So what we're going to do, we're using the semolina flour again, using some baking soda and some baking powder. Just kind of toss that, mix it all together so it's evenly spread out. And then the next part that we're going to do is we're going to cut butter. Now, cutting butter, you can do this a couple different ways. You can put it on a cutting board and cut them into small chunks, or you can just use your fingers. Just kind of pinch off pieces and just drop it right into the flour.
One suggestion I would have would be to possibly use unsalted butter. Again, just to reduce the sodium aspect. People ask me all the time, salt it, unsalt it. You know, I know a lot of people buy the salt to add the flavor. You're not really going to notice that change. You're not going to notice that the salt's missing from the butter. So unsalted would be a more healthier, heart-healthy option for you.
Right. Okay. Now our butter's in there. And then to cut it, you're just going to use your hands. You can use a mixer with a baker's attachment, the paddle. You just put it in there and turn it on and let it slowly just kind of push the grain, the flour into the butter, let it separate and spread out. So all we're going to do is you just put it in your fingers and you just find where the butter is and just slowly push it through.
Nice thing about using your hands, less dishes to do, less time.
Absolutely.
And it kind of makes it fun too, especially if you're getting kids incorporated into the kitchen. They would love this part.
And it's almost therapeutic, just, you know, it's like pushing sand through your fingers, yeah. You sit at the beach and, yeah.
Make you think of the beach maybe a little bit with that.
So you don't want too many clumps of butter in here, so it may take a little bit of time just to make sure that it's all incorporated evenly, but that's part of it, yeah. That's just the enjoyment process.
Absolutely, and that's something, if you do want to save time, I mean, it doesn't hurt to go to a mixer or a blender or anything that has that extra attachment to make the dough. put it in there, turn it on, and you can be busy doing something else during that time.
Yeah. Or if you're crunched on time, you can. If you have two people in the kitchen at the same time, one of you can be making biscuits and the other one can be making the filling.
Absolutely.
You know, just to
save time.
Yeah, have an enjoyable activity together. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, my daughter's 2 years old. She'd be loving this right now. Yeah. She's getting to the point she brings the chair up to the countertop, says, "Mommy, we're cooking." So that's something that, honestly, I would probably get her into this and start playing around and just having fun.
Absolutely. You'll notice when you're getting close, the flour isn't so grainy. It's starting to it has a little bit of moisture in there from the butter, but you're also just it's going to start forming in your hands. It's not going to just fall out. When you squeeze it, you're going to see that it holds its shape. That's when you know that the butter is getting pretty well incorporated into everything. Just going to do this a couple more times. It's always nice to run your fingers through it to see and feel if you have any more lumps in there that you need to really kind of push out, but I think we're almost there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take my gloves off here. Easy cleanup. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to add our chives and then our buttermilk.
The reason we're using the buttermilk versus maybe like a skim milk or a low-fat percentage milk, just because the biscuits, you do want them to have more of that moisture aspect to that. You could switch it out if you want to, but overall this recipe is not going to change much with the calories, the fat content, by just switching that milk out.
All you're going to do is incorporate it now. Get it off the whisk. Then you're just going to make 6 just small little biscuits. Kind of fold them in your hands. You don't want to press them. You want to keep them loose. That way there's more air in there, and it allows the baking soda and the baking powder to react and puff up once they're in the heat.
So as you can see, he's putting this on top of the mixture we already had pre-done. So that's where it's getting that pot pie feel, where it's going to have that crust of the biscuits on top, and we're kind of avoiding the crust on the bottom like you do see with some pot pies. By doing that, you're cutting out more carbohydrates. So if you're somebody diabetic, kind of counting carbs, watching blood sugar control, you just have the crust on top. So you can kind of control how much of that you have. It's not all the way around like a normal pot pie for you.
Right. 2 more here. And they don't have to be perfectly round either. You can make them smaller and put little droplets everywhere. It's completely up to you.
Yeah, because they'll bake out, puff up, and kind of expand out for you.
Okay. So we've got our biscuits in there. Our oven is set to 350 degrees. We're going to put that in for a half an hour, check it, see where we're at, and then we'll be right back. All right, so it's been a half an hour. Our pot pie's finished. It's got a nice golden brown crust on top of the muffins, the chive muffins here. So we're just gonna pull it out, sit it on our counter. Good thing to do is kind of let it sit for 5 minutes. Let all that that moisture kind of reabsorb into things, help hold its shape, and then we'll take it out and we'll serve it up.
Absolutely. This recipe actually makes 6 servings, so it's perfect because you have 6 biscuits, so you can actually proportion it out into 6 servings for you. One serving is going to have about 8 grams of fiber. Again, per day, you want about 25 to 35 grams per day. So this little section right here would be 8 grams alone. So you can see it's very high in fiber for this recipe, which is going to get you more of why the more fiber for heart health. So we're going to try this and kind of let you know how things taste.
Gotcha.
Kind of want to get the bean, the kale, and the biscuit all in one. Nice thing about that, has a really rich flavor. Kind of, you think of pot pie when you think of it. Basic pot pie, again, none of the meat is added there, but you got the kale, you got the beans in there that adds kind of to that flavor, and the biscuits. You think of the crust like a pie crust almost for a pot pie, where here you get more of the biscuit aspect, so it's kind of like biscuit and dumplings a little bit too. So you kind of get a combination of both those recipes.
It's cooked in the liquid, so it keeps it nice and moist, especially on the bottom, but you still get that dark crust that you expect from eating a pot pie.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you get the best of both worlds there.
So very good. So hopefully you can try this recipe at home and tell us what you think. We hope you enjoyed the recipe that we prepared for you today. We hope you enjoy all the ideas and different things that we talked about, how to incorporate more fiber into your diet.
For more heart healthy recipes, you can visit readhealth.org/iHeartCooking.
We'll see you next month.